Hello, my name is Kirill Chepizhko. I'm a 3D artist, and in this video we're going to be talking about lighting presets and KeyShot. More specifically, I'm going to give you a couple of tips for working with lighting. And lighting presets basically control how fast you're going to render it and what kind of quality you're going to get out of your render. It's a balance between quality and speed, but at the same time, I think the final result really depends on a number of factors, such as the complexity of shaders, and in our case, they're all not so simple. They were all modified, customized, plugged in with additional textures. Basically, for this model, none of the standard materials worked, and all of them needed tweaking. So, of course, it is resource demanding. So that's shaders number one. Number two, the complexity of scene in terms of poly count. This is even though this is just a watch, but I was going for a hero asset with this one, so the poly count is actually pretty high because the strap was modeled in ZBrush, and this is a high poly export. And I also, when I was exporting the SCAD data, there's lots of fillets, and like fillets on chamfers and chamfers on top of fillets, right? So just to be able to sell the look slightly more, and any type of close-up like this one would still hold up in the render. So that's factor number two, the amount of polygons, and then also in this particular scene, simple HDRI wasn't enough either. So as of right now, I have this many lights created inside a KeyShot to help highlight particular parts of the design. It's not too much different, to be honest, if I turn this off. Let's see. But it really helps. They were created, like right now I'm rotating this, but they were created for specific shots for the final renders, so they were added on the go. But they also contribute to the speed and quality, basically, and so the lighting presets also are influenced, or vice versa. So to get access to the lighting presets, we go into the lighting tab, and we can see that there's a couple of lighting presets that have already, they are basically standard here, and then the area underneath highlights all the editable features of each lighting preset, and you're able to customize it. So this is what we're going to talk about here. It's worth pointing out that right now I have the GPU mode on, and it works differently with different presets, but it's just a matter of playing around and finding out what works for you for each specific scene. This scene is already so much custom and heavy that there's not a huge difference really between what kind of preset. Like it still, as you can see, requires a good time to render the complex areas, because with the GPU mode on, the GPU is way ahead of CPU rendering here, because you can see it takes no time to render parts that are not that complex. Like as I'm rotating and you take a look at how long it takes to render this band, it takes less than a second. But the materials such as I think I'm using thin film here, or this is glass, and then I think the back should be thin film. Those things, as they are rendered and as the light rays are passing through, it requires a different number of light rays, so different number, like a different amount of time to render this more accurately or closer to what you want. But you can see that for simpler setups, it's just almost instant result. And so we'll go through each one of them in order. So basically, when you have your GPU mode off, the look is fairly close to the final. It's more like a draft. It's definitely not something that I would render with normally, but I do definitely, when with heavier scenes and with just, it doesn't make sense to work in the viewport and keep any of the other lighting presets on, because it's just going to be a waste of time. Unless you're looking for that specific, very specific look on the shader, then I would recommend switching to the lighting mode that you're going to be rendering with, because we're not going to be doing performance mode. So performance is more like setting up, getting to that 20% as fast as possible for the whole scene. And then I would say go ahead and switch, and that's probably what I mostly work with. Switch to basic or product or interior. So performance mode is the only one that I would recommend with GPU off, because it's not actually even available. As soon as we switch to basic, we can jump to GPU. And you can see that the difference between basic, product, and interior, and honestly I never really touched jewelry because it has like settings specific to working with jewelry, as far as light bounces are concerned and stuff like that, or ray bounces and caustics. So as you can see in basic, the shadow quality is 1, ray bounce is 6, and global illumination is not even on. Then product, shadow quality 3, ray bounce is 14, and global illumination is on with 1 ray bounce. The interior, as you can see, will give you much more accurate shadows and ambient occlusion, and as well as these slight nuances in materials as light bounces more times. There's this little switch for when you customize your presets. You can choose between product or interior mode, but with interior mode you're basically getting more bounces in ray bounces and more bounces in global illumination. I usually, when I work or when I need several renders with the same preset, what I do is I go to custom, create this, we're just gonna call it Kirill, and I will save it with my own settings. So for example, because we have the glass still on, I know that if I set it to 0, you can see that it's not getting enough ray bounces. If I start bumping this up, it's getting enough bounces for basic surfaces and non-reflective surfaces and non-transparent surfaces. So for example, for this leather, 2 or 5 is not a huge difference, or even 2 or 10. Of course it's gonna get slightly better and better, but incrementally, but after a certain amount of ray bounces, you're not getting much better results. But for the glass, the difference for the glass, for thin film, for anything reflective or transparent, including metal because it's reflective, there's quite a difference between 2 and let's say I mean, we will never really see 16 in the quality of 16 rays in real time, I think, because it still takes time to do. But you can see that in the glass. As we bump them higher, to me, from just experience, I would say that 8 is the minimal amount to have glass represented accurately. It's basically like how many times light passes through and comes back. If it's not coming back enough, it's going to return black for the screen. And so for my custom preset for this scene, when I'm working on it, I usually just say 8. I don't really care about shadow quality so much because right now it's not that important. And most of the time I actually turn off global illumination. It's not a dramatic increase in the look, but if I have to, I can just set it to 1 and keep it on. And I can also change or go back and forth in between the interior mode and the product mode in my custom one. So from playing around with the GPU mode, I found out that in product mode works really well with the GPU, at least for my setup. So I usually just stay in product mode until I actually need something much more specific. And so you usually go through these settings, but you can come back into your scene, and some of the materials would have their own setting for how many times they're bouncing or letting the light rays pass through, and usually I would just knock it down all to 1 because it is just unnecessary. To do that, we would go into the edit material, and go into roughness and just bring down the samples, because depending on how close up the material is, and again the complexity and the amount of rays bouncing, sometimes bumping up the amount of samples doesn't give you a better result. So here, 1, or I mean, like, that's maybe too minimal, but going through your materials and the materials that do have roughness, or if it's in a material graph and it's a more complex one, let's see if we can find it here. I can drop down on all the samples. Basically anywhere in the setting, if I do have that option, if I'm trying to save time or not increase the render time, because these renders, even on heavy or like capable machines, these renders can take just unnecessary time, and it's all about optimizing it. You can see the metal still looks good, and in the render it will still look fairly realistic. And so because this is not PBR, this is all about like playing with the settings and the settings relationship in between themselves. So knocking down the samples on materials, bumping up the light rays in the lighting preset. To help better illustrate my point about the difference and why you need to be aware of lighting presets, we're gonna create a little scene right now. There's no ground plane at the moment because this is not really a ground plane, and this HDRI is just lighting up the scene. So we're gonna first create ground plane by going to Add Geometry, Plane, and we're just gonna scale it up like this. Then we're gonna add a cube and another cube, snap it to the ground. And one of the materials we're going to have glass for the bigger cube. And for the smaller cube, we're going to give it some sort of plastic. Now let's make it color. So this is the very basic setup. I want to scale the ground up a little bit. And we're going to make the ground, let's just say, soft and shiny, so you get the reflections as well. Also edit the material, and then the glass. For some reason the transparency setting is not that high, so we're going to make it fully transparent like this. And you can see even with a basic lighting setup, glass already starts looking like glass. But I want to make a point by showing you that if ray bounces are 0, we're not getting the reflections in any of the materials, and we're especially not getting any transparency from the glass. So the moment we're gonna start bumping up the ray bounces by, let's just say 8, this is gonna give us the very basic reflections here, and a bit of transparency in the glass. So like you can think of it as energy of light. It's not enough to make things happen here. So with 2, you can see now it makes all of the sides transparent, and we can keep bumping it up. 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is the amount that, well, I mean, it's visible at even at 4 or 3. It's just a difference of how accurate you want it to be. And I would say that 8 is probably the lowest, because after 8, the differences in accuracy in reflections are not that big. It's only going to be somewhere in small details. And of course, it changes with global illumination and changing the mode, but not so much. Like, it's not that important. And then another point I wanted to show you is adding custom lights into the scene, which would be, we'll just add another geometry, make it a cube, scale it down, and we will make it the only light source in the scene, because right now the light source in the scene is the HDRI. If we make brightness 0, no information is coming through. But this last cube that we added, we're going to turn that material into area light and set it to watt and let it be 1000 watt. So depending on the scale of the scene, you can see, like, right now this is the only source of illumination, and it's working with, let's just see the product. I don't really care about shadow quality. 14 ray bounces. We don't need the global illumination here. And as I keep bumping this up, we can make it 10,000, which will blow out the material properties a little bit. So you can see it's not a great way to keep adding more light to the scene. I would say instead of that, you can make it, I think about standard light bulb is about 6 to 800 watts. What we need to do is I guess we need to add more. But we can also keep adding more light sources. So instead of 1, it's going to be 2. depending on the scenario. But then another way, I'll hide the first one, and I'm gonna turn this light from area light to, well, we can do spotlight, point light, but what we're really looking for is, and then emissive is not a good way to light up the scene. It's just for things that emit light but not really light up everything around them. Just, to get some reflections maybe. What we're really looking for is IES light right here. We're gonna set the multiplier higher, 100, and give it some radius as well. So IES lights are they have photometric data, so it's basically like physically accurate light in your scene, and it doesn't really care what type of geometry it was assigned to, because the shape of that light is already coded into that preset. Where was this cube? So we're gonna, usually when I'm working with lighting and I need to add more, and I don't need to control the shape of that light too much, I would use an IES, because I think it just works faster under any lighting preset. So this is pretty much it, and in the next video we're going to be talking about photographic edits inside of KeyShot.